DuPont knows absolutely nothing about how to grow and sell salmon. Okay? So one way we could have approached this market was we could have just said, we'll go out and we'll sell this as a feed ingredient and we'll go through feed producers. And then they'll go to the salmon farmers, etc. But what we realized very soon is that without a lot of marketing, without a lot of thought behind how this new salmon category was brought out to the marketplace, it wouldn't be successful. And so we partnered up with one large fish farmer called Aqua Chile. They're located in Puerto Montt, Chile. One good thing about the salmon market from our perspective is it's pretty concentrated. So you shouldn't be thinking about lots of little farmers. You should be thinking about 7 to 10 companies that control all the salmon farming mostly in the world. So Aqua Chile is a company that has everything from they have salmon egg production to smolt production to large fish production to harvesting to delivery in the United States. So together with our technology and our marketing capability in building brands in DuPont, our brand building, our omega-3 technology, together with their salmon farming expertise and their access to retailers, you put those capabilities together, and what you end up with is the ability to bring out this really new category of salmon. So a completely different idea. Here, the key thing that we need from open innovation was the ability to get to that market, to understand salmon farming, to understand that business, and also to implement our technology all the way downstream, all the way down to the consumer in the supermarket. So I encourage you, if you live in New York City, go to Fresh Direct and buy it. If you live in the Bay Area, buy it at the Berkeley Bowl, Portland, Oregon, we're at Zupans. Look for Verlasso, it's a great product. All right, so let me talk about one more example, and then I'll wrap it up. I mentioned to you before the importance of our advanced materials businesses. So our advanced materials in DuPont, they all are in a big hurry to get to renewably sourced feedstocks. There's a couple of reasons for that. One reason is that DuPont used to own Conoco, used to own an oil company, we don't anymore, and a lot of our raw material production facilities that go into our advanced materials businesses were sold off when we sold our fibers businesses. So they're no longer tied or backward integrated to petroleum-based intermediates. So they're also looking to, some of the ideas you've already heard, they like to de-risk their risk against petroleum. Their customers are asking for it. So there's a lot of pull in DuPont to move to bio-based materials. So we buy, for example, a lot of BDO. So if you roll the clock back to late 2008, there was a lot of very credible, at least 3 or 4, what we thought were very credible smaller companies out in the universe here coming up with different routes of BDO. And in 2008, we had no idea which of those routes was going to make it. And we were just hopeful that we could have access to that material. Well, it turns out that BioAmber has this great route to succinic acid, and it required some technology to take that succinic acid to BDO. DuPont had some technology on the shelf that we could offer to license to them. And basically, in return for that, what we really want is some advantage access to be able to buy from them, be a really good customer of theirs when they're successful. So that's another way, a completely different way of approaching it. This is one of the ones where, again, we can't do everything. So there's some really smart people out there. In 2008, BioAmber was a much smaller company. I think you saw the numbers there. We didn't know whether they'd win or not, but from our perspective, it gave us an option on if they were to win, we'd have some ability to profit from that using some of our technology. All right, so let me just wrap up with a couple of challenges that I see. I think it was really interesting. I think there's a lot of agreement up here on what some of these key challenges are. One of the most important things is that this industrial biosciences thing is the collision between folks that are coming from biotech and folks that are coming from chemicals and materials like me. And one of the biggest issues is around time horizons. And that's all driven because of the fact that in biotech, people are used to inventing products that have really high margins. And once you sort of go through your clinical data and you've shown that the drug is efficacious or whatever, it's sort of like, doesn't really matter whether or not how much the manufacturing costs or, all that stuff is a relatively small issue. And so folks that are coming from the biotech world are used to showing their, I hit my milestone, I'm ready to go. And at that point, they can exit, they can get paid because the manufacturing is something that'll happen over time. It's very certain. In the world we live in, as those of you who are from the grubby world of chemicals and materials like I am, our world, you don't get paid until the technology has been proven, it's been piloted, it's been demoed, it's been scaled up, and the customers have accepted it. Then you get paid. Very different. And that's a real issue because of the difference in expectations. We've heard a lot, and I think Mark said this really well, about the capital intensiveness of these businesses makes people like me very careful. Right? People that run our businesses and large chemical companies very careful. So it's important for the startups to be more aggressive. You guys are pushing, I think, the pace of this. That's exactly what this industry needs. And on the other hand, we in the world we come from, you never get ahead in a DuPont or a Dow or a BASF by being the guy that took the big risk on the technology that didn't quite work out. So that's just a reality of the world we live in. We've got to work together to make those, to find solutions where the pace and the need for the smaller companies to move more quickly and the carefulness of the larger companies can work together. That's an important challenge. I'd finally just say, I think it's obvious, but maybe it's worth saying, we're all doing something I think that's really, really hard and frankly really noble. Trying to do some really, really, really new technology. Really difficult thing to do. We're trying to integrate across lots of different disciplines. We're trying to bring together lots of different folks that don't maybe naturally or at least historically work together. Making all that happen is very, very difficult. Building new supply chains is hard. Bringing new technology to market is hard. Putting new configurations of value chains together is hard. Getting customers downstream, like Mark was talking about, that whole downstream piece is hard. It takes time. It takes will. So what I would say is we've been at this, I think, a number of people as I look around the room, there's a number of us who've been at this quite a long time. It's going to take a while longer, and it's going to be really hard, but certainly I can tell you from DuPont's perspective, we're continuing to invest even more. With the Genencore acquisition, I think you can see we're sort of doubling down on this space. We really believe it's going to happen. So we believe that view is worth the climb. It's just going to take time. So, thanks very much.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you to all the speakers. All the presentations were excellent. I'd like to open it up to the audience if there are any questions. Anyone? I will ask one question maybe of the panelists and whoever would like to jump in. One of the preoccupations that small startups can have is around intellectual property. They tend to be very apprehensive about protecting their IP, developing their IP, and they're always worried and working with large corporations how that gets dealt with. Any comments from any of you as to how large companies view intellectual property coming out of startups and how win-wins can be established?
Well, I can say from the perspective of Lanxess, who is not just working with Bio Orlando, but just recently invested in Bio Orlando, that this is probably, first of all, we're looking at technology. We're looking at how solid it is, as I mentioned in my presentation, how solid we believe the processes are that the bio partners have been establishing. And once we feel confident that this is solid, then IP certainly is the next most important issue. And there's no other way to, other than just putting the necessary resources into it to thorough FOT study to make sure that all I's crossed and T's dotted. Yeah, I mean, IP is the critical. This is basically the foundation of the very interest. So if that's solid, then if it's not solid, then the concern is there. If it's solid, then
yeah, I guess typically there's a few classic problems, right? So what we typically try to do when we sit down at an early stage where IP is still being developed is we sit down together and say two scenarios: what happens if we win together, and then what happens if the technology doesn't work out, and what happens if one partner doesn't want to go forward. And the key is always to think about incentivizing everybody to make the whole venture successful, but also thinking forward. Both parties have to be able to move forward without being blocked. We call it the no blocking thing. Really important to think through in the beginning. So typically that's what we have to do, and it has to be fair to both parties. In the end, the kind of relationships that we're talking about are longer term. They're not something that's not a buy-sell relationship. I'm not buying a used car from somebody when we're doing one of these joint development agreements. And so we have to make sure it's fair for both parties and sustainable for both parties. And that's usually the way we think about it.
So in our case, it's the IP strategy that it is different from the conventional chemical cases. In biofield, it's a growing industry. Of course, we have a strategy to protect our business. But the bio business now we have to grow up together. So we would like to use IP to serve the right parties, right partners. Let's say the innovation with the right partner.
Are there any other questions? Yes.
Bill Baum, Genomatica. I was just wondering, I heard a lot about conventional sugars to all your products. what kind of projections do you have timelines-wise going from sucrose or dextrose over to biomass? What are your projected timelines? Because a lot of these things can be commercialized that we're talking about, and certainly, Mark, what you're doing is already there. So what do you project for the biomass transition?
Well, part of it is going to be another capital question. Our plants are expensive to start with. Now you start with cellulosic and add that capital, you probably add another, for our size of plants, you add another $150 million capital. So what we just talked about, how difficult it is to raise money to build your first big plant, or in our case, our second or third big plant. If you, I'm not saying double it, but add a significant amount just to make that next fermentable step, it's not going to make it easier. I think from a technology point of view, I'm really, if you look what's out there today, and the different technologies being available, almost ready to go to commercialization, I think here again, the issue is going to be who's going to be first, and who's going to spend the $100, $150, $200 million to get you there. And jokingly, I said last night in a meeting, if somebody has fermentable sugars from cellulosic, I'm first in line to buy. Do I necessarily want to invest myself? Well, that's a different question. Yeah, and I think that's where we are today. Some of the bigger brothers here, again, NatureWorks being a small company, relatively speaking, are probably going to be going first. I assume are going to be going first, but I would be very surprised if, let's say, 5 years from now, we're still having this discussion. I think by then, yeah, we're going to have these cellulosic to fermentable sugar plants in a number of parts, we're going to have a number of plants in different parts of the world.
Yeah, I guess I'd add from DuPont's perspective, we're moving forward very quickly with our cellulosic ethanol, but the key is that it's driven by government mandates. So for the world we're living in, we're going to replace in the materials world where there's no government mandate or subsidy or anything like that for switching out the sugar. I think it may take longer. So I guess the way we're looking at it is fuels where there is this advanced biofuels directive kind of thing and similar things in other countries. That there may happen faster, then hopefully once the technologies get to scale, they'll be cost competitive and we can bring them over to our materials businesses as well.
In my personal opinion, it should be done within 5 years. But when we think about biomass, we have to not only the technology, but also the logistics. Now, the sugar industry, the logistics already established. But when we think about the biomass, where we get the biomass, how to transport the biomass, we strongly think about the business scheme, including
We have time for one more question. Okay, well listen, thank you everyone for attending our session, and thank you to all of our speakers for